Hello, greetings everyone. This is Payman Lorenzo, your host, your friend, your coach. Today I have a back-to-back with one of my dearest new friends I met. Well, I've known her for a while. We met through the beautiful serving circle about a year or so ago, and finally we got a chance to connect about 2, 3 weeks ago. We had a beautiful chat, and we did a part one of her incredible story last week. Highly recommend you guys watch it because this lady right here is an incredible, not just because we all have inspiring stories, but she's one of those that has a truly goosebump inducing story. We covered that last week on part one, and today for part two, we're going to talk about her business because we didn't have the time to do so. So, anyways, Jan, welcome to the show, my friend. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to be here again. Nice to see
Pleasure,
you.
pleasure all mine. So, for people who don't know you, give us a quick summary of who's Jan as a woman, as a human being, and then we're gonna dive into the business side.
Okay. Who am I? I am a lover of nature. Love being outside. Um, I've always had a very strong connection to animals, so pets and other animals. And now I'm a health and wellness coach, and I just love it. It's something I truly enjoy doing.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of holds all my worlds together. My world as a scientist, and then my world as a holistic practitioner, and use incorporate her in my life now. And I kind of combine the both of them together to help people. I tend to people tend to come to me when they have real health challenges. It's not like
Mm-hmm.
many people come to me when they just want to get healthy and they're not looking to change something, or they don't have something that they're trying to deal with. But yeah, and so I love to work with people one-on-one or in groups, and then help them kind of navigate, the health challenges. And I kind of, like I said, merge them both. I am also, like you said, a yoga teacher, so that is probably one of the things that gives me the greatest joy.
Mm-hmm.
Teach group classes, one-on-ones, and corporate classes. So that's a lot of fun too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're going to unpack all of that. One thing that you said the first time we talked and that really stuck with me, that you said, you are a scientific woo-woo. Tell us more about that. What does that mean?
Well, my friend told me that years ago, because I still do very much think like a scientist because I understand a lot of the science. And so when I look at something, I'm really always looking at that kind of very anatomical, very physiological system and how it works and the interconnectedness of it and the intricacies of all that kind of stuff. But then as I started to add in a lot of holistic modalities, and a lot of the, traditional Chinese medicine that I knew and other modalities that are very ancient, it was the combination of looking at or a pet as as this organism, or as this being that's not just a body, that has that very spiritual and very, mind, body, spirit kind of, that's who we are and that's really who they are, and taking that into account when I looked at their path to healing, and realizing that there was some things that I couldn't explain, and that was okay because I really believed they work and I saw them work. But if you were to ask me scientifically how they worked, I probably wouldn't have been able to tell you, and realized that I didn't really need to know they worked. I just knew they worked.
So, when you're facing an issue or challenge, which approach wins it? The scientific or the ooh aspect?
I think I really do mold them, like meld them both now.
Mm-hmm.
I'll look at the scientific, but then when I'm looking to, as far as, like, let's say, as a way to manage that challenge or to heal from that challenge, I look at some of the spiritual aspects or some of the non-traditional aspects and kind of incorporate them in. But also, like, so for example, if I'm looking at somebody who's having some sort of respiratory problem,
Mm-hmm.
I'll then start to ask a lot of, let's say, non-physiological questions. I could ask the physiological questions, like, do they have allergies, or do they have, like, some of the more physical questions. But then I'll ask a lot of the more emotional, cognitive, like, where do they hold stress, and where Have they suffered any loss because grief is held in the lungs, like things like that. And when I go to help them manage that challenge, I'm going to address both the more spiritual kind of meaning, what I think is behind it, and then also the physical, because I think then they heal totally as opposed to just healing the physical. And then if you don't kind of address all the other stuff, I don't know that we have a really true deep healing.
Hmm. So you mentioned also that you did Reiki on animals. How did that
Mhm.
happen?
How did it happen? Um, I well, I had my own pets, and as my pets, through the years, I've had two dogs, two cats, and I've used all the things that I help, like my pet clients, with through the years on my own pets. But I think they were the ones in almost a lot of the modalities that I do use for myself and my clients. They reflected back to me that they really did work. Animals don't sit there and worry about whether things work or try to figure things out. They have this innate brilliance within them that they just know it helps them. And then they get up and they're not hung up on knowing a study and whether it was actually proven. I mean, that's just not how animals
Hmm.
are. And yeah, and I've just through the years I've been asked to come in and do like gentle massage. This is in person, but I've done online stuff with pets. But gentle massage and Reiki on pets, and it's remarkable the changes I see. And if I ever had any question as to whether things were helping, I just like like it is like I've had dogs that like I had a dog that had congestive heart failure, and the owner
Hmm.
called me and I went to the house and I was like, I mean, the dog, and they were seeing a vet. I mean, this wasn't without veterinary care. They had a veterinarian, and I thought, I'll try. And I told the caretaker, the owners, I don't like to call them owners, but but the pet parents, um, I don't know what I can do, but I'll try. And dog hadn't eaten for days, and I check in always, like I'm going to follow up. And that day, the dog mainly slept, and the next day she got up and she had some water and she drank, and then she went out in the backyard, and it was like, oh my gosh. And I couldn't believe it. And it was like, I think I worked with the dog. They moved, but I think I worked with the dog for over a year. And it would be really interesting because she would be doing pretty well. And then about 3 weeks, she would start to decline and they would have me come back. And then it would be like, and she wasn't suffering by any means. And that's what I think is kind of beautiful. And that's when people
Hmm.
really value it. It's like that whole, especially for animals, it's that whole quality of life is the fact of like, am I keeping them alive for me after having so many pets, having enough pets, or do they have a good quality of life? And we never want them to suffer. But that decision to euthanize, which is a very compassionate decision in a lot of cases, is really um is really hard. And so this a lot of times gives the person time to kind of come to that point. And also you're not compromising the animal's quality of life. So they still probably, in most of the cases that I've worked on, at least you're improving quality of life so they're not suffering. And so that's like a blessing too, because you don't want anything to suffer.
Hmm. How different is it doing Reiki on a human versus an animal?
Um, I mean, different, you have the practical differences and the fact that if I do massage on a pet and they don't like to be touched, I have to make
Especially if
sure
they
I'm
don't
not
know
going to,
you.
that's right. I have to make sure that they're not going to bite me or scratch me. But I think in some ways it's so much easier doing it on a pet. I mean,
Really?
can't communicate with them, but they communicate on other levels and they don't have they don't have all the cognitive stuff and like, I don't think they hold,
Mm.
those trauma. They tend to a lot of animals anyway tend to process things very differently. They usually don't go down the self-pity avenue that often. So they're not wallowing and sitting there like, oh, woe is me. And I think people, in some ways, if they're receptive, they're receptive. But I think people can have resistance and they have things that, good practitioner can tell when someone's holding on to something, even if they don't want to articulate it and verbalize it. But I think people hold back,
Mm-hmm.
and animals kind of know what's good for them, and they'll come over and they'll actually, it's like when I practice yoga, I have a room, like a yoga room in my house that's only for yoga. And if I go in, all my pets have always gone in there and they just go lay down. It's like when I'm there, it's like if I'm practicing, they'll come in. It's like they know the energy is good and they'll just like chill out and they go to sleep.
Beautiful, beautiful. Tell us more about your business now. What is your business and what is your impact to your business?
So my business is all the things I've talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I do quite a lot of one-on-one work with people who have those health challenges or with pets. But I do some group activities or like I do group yoga classes. I do events. I've done things like yoga at conferences and things like that you know, as a different kind of way to um, a different kind of way to impact people and to get them into a space that's heartfelt where their mind is not running the show. Mm, I think as human beings, obviously we think and we think all the time. And any mechanism we can use to quiet those thoughts and to turn down that chatter and that self-talk, even a little bit, is useful. I mean, we want to think and we want to be, but we don't want to live all the time in our heads. And especially these days where we're bombarded by a lot of information and a lot of negativity, we need some way to kind of quiet that down so we don't live in a constant state of stress and fear. And we also don't rule our lives coming from that place
Sure.
of stress and fear. And so I'll go into companies and work with people or try to give, employees or the staff like a little bit of a reprieve in a busy day where they're not, where they can like just be with themselves, see how they feel, and navigate the world from there as opposed from, that constant state of like fight or flight. Yeah, that's probably one of my favorite things to do. And it's really, and I think that for me, when I teach yoga and I teach people with yoga, it is much more than just physical movement. I try to bring in a lot of like reminders because I think the body is a really great demonstration of a lot of the things that we know we have to. A few weeks ago, I worked on boundaries, healthy boundaries. And I was talking about, we have boundaries in the body. There's
Mhm.
anatomical boundaries. I mean, our chest, our respiratory system is physically separated from our intestinal system. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to. And there is that
Mhm.
diaphragm, the layers of tissue, the connective tissue between to keep one compartmentalized from the other. So we need that boundary. And just like in us, I mean, we need healthy boundaries. We need to learn when to say no. And sometimes if you can show people that in their body and they realize it's so natural, like it's a natural part of us, it
Mhm.
becomes easier to kind of implement them in their own lives.
Mm.
So I like to use yoga in that way, like sort of like as a demonstration to a lot of the things that like communication. Our cells communicate all the time. They don't sit there and decide which cell they're going to communicate with.
Sure.
There's always this constant exchange. They're not putting up walls. They have this ability to like, they're not holding back. They're like, oh, okay. They know how to regulate themselves and how to communicate. And that's why all the systems work. So we too can do the same if we look at our own lives. Like, so I like to bring a lot of that. So it's much more than just yoga. There are life lessons there.
Sure. Speaking of yoga, what are some of the main benefits of yoga for health, for healthy living?
Oh gosh. One is, we concentrate like a lot of other like traditional, or ancient sort of practices. It's a lot about breath. So we focus a lot on breathing. And
Hmm.
because of that, I think it's really good for things like stress management and things like that because you learn how to breathe. And that sounds kind of funny. When I first started practicing yoga, I thought, well, what do you mean you learn how to breathe? I mean, I've been breathing my whole life. But we did. But the thing is that breath awareness is being
Mm,
awareness of the breath and being able to use your breath as a tool to help you calm down and help manage stress or not to react, in a situation. And so that's one. Flexibility and strength are another. So a lot of my students through the years, I've kind of evolved my classes, and because I had to evolve, because as I got older, my practice that I did 20 years ago, I'm not going to do today. That's just, and so, but it became much more about could I help people in their normal everyday functions? So I have students in their 80s or older, and then I have student like, 50s or 40s. So, but it's so exciting to me when I have a student who says to me, like, oh my gosh, like it's older saying, oh my gosh, now I can reach the stuff on the high shelf in my cabinet, like practical things, which just shows me that, that range of motion and that keeping flexible and strong so you don't tighten up as we age, or as just to keep people being able to
mhm,
um, function in their normal lives. We were in, all my classes, but I have a lot of students that want to work on balance because falls are a really big issue. So keeping the body so that you have more steadiness is really important. So there's just so many ways that it transfers over into our everyday life.
mhm. You mentioned that you have clients from all ages. What would you say is your ideal avatar?
Um, my ideal avatar is probably men or women. Doesn't, it's not gender specific. Uh, it's much more, I would probably say 60s and 70s.
Mm,
I is probably my ideal. I love working with people, like I said, to help them. Like I have students who say, like, "Oh my gosh, I can get on the floor with my grandchildren now, or my great grandchildren." Like that to me is amazing.
sure.
And since we have, and this isn't, but we do have a very large aging population now, and people are living longer, so we might as well live well. And
Absolutely.
yeah.
What would you what would you say is the main thing that you really help your clients with? You mentioned practicality and quality of life, but what is the number one benefit they get by working with you?
Um, I think, well, first of all, like I said, I think that my follow-up and my sort of
Mm,
like my checking in is really vital to my relationship with them and for their relationship with themselves. Because I think when I ask them how they are, if I check in after a class or after a session, they then start asking themselves how they are,
mm,
which is not something we're trained to do. We're trained to go and to get things done, and not to pause and to even reflect on how we are. And so as I check in with people, either via text or messenger between sessions, and they know that they can check in with me and ask a question.
mm,
So it's not like they're going to be left wondering. I think one of my biggest frustrations with the more traditional modalities is that they send you home with, okay,
mm.
change your diet. And
Yeah.
you sit there and you're like, okay, there's so much information out there on the web. Like, what does that mean? How do I change my diet? What am I supposed to do? There's information everywhere, and you're kind of overwhelmed. And I think that by I'm not going to sit there. And then they send you away and you see them in 6 months to a year. And when you
Mm,
come back, you really haven't done much if you go to traditional because you were overwhelmed. And after a while, you're like, I can't, you look into it for a few weeks or a week or a few days. And then you're like, okay, well, this is just overwhelming and I can't handle this. And so I think that constant or that consistent follow up is really key
absolutely.
to being able to make a change.
Hmm.
And
Speaking
make
of
this. and I'll just say, and to see how you are along the way. So to make a change, which is where my scientific brain comes in, it's like you make a change and you sit there and say, okay, like, how did this work for me? What do I need to do? Do I feel better? If I have blood work or some other testing done, like I do carotenoid scans,
Mm,
antioxidant scans, has that changed? And then you sit there and say, okay, well, let me change something else and see how that works. And so it's a constant evolution of figuring out what's the best thing. And I think we always have to do that because things are always changing. We're not stagnant. We don't get, we're just not stuck in one place.
yeah,
Things
thank God.
happen or we age, and then all of a sudden something else shifts.
Absolutely. Speaking of change, what's the most remarkable transformation you've seen from one of your clients so far?
Hmm. Oh, yeah. Okay. So interesting. I started working with a client about 3 years ago, and she actually called me for her dog. So I worked on the dog for like a year, doing Reiki and gentle massage. The dog had really bad breathing problems, and then had this closed trachea. So so I worked, and then the dog passed away. And in the process,
Mm.
also, sadly enough, her daughter passed away also very suddenly. So I started working with her and just doing Reiki and yoga with her, some nutritional help, but was the shift to see now where she is so much more body aware and self aware. And she tends to be like a lot of people are, a constant giver. So she's always doing for somebody else. And to actually sit there and kind of realize that it's okay that she do things for herself, that she set those boundaries sometimes and say no to people, and not in a negative way, but it's really been, and to start to ask those questions of like, how is she and what does she feel like? And I remember the day where like I would talk about the fact that she had to take better care of herself. And then all of a sudden I stopped asking and I was just texting her for a few weeks of just like, how do you feel today? Kind of thing. And then all of a sudden she said it one day, and I was like, wow, finally she's kind of reached that point
Mm.
of where she's starting to ask herself those questions
Mm.
and starting to, because I think those questions lead to better choices. Or you're aware when you don't make those wise choices. I'm not saying no one's perfect. So it's the awareness really that you're teaching people.
What kind of questions?
Oh gosh. Like I was with somebody yesterday who's having sleep problems. So she told me she got a sleep monitor where, and so where she's looking at her sleep and the quality of sleep. And so I said, That's great." And she said at the end, I guess, or in there, I said, now when she gets a good night's sleep, I said she has to start asking herself those questions of like, you know, well, what did I do yesterday? Like, I slept really well last night. Okay, what did I eat? How much exercise did I get? Did I get outside and get some sunlight? Did I drink water? And I said, start to track that and just notice like if there are any trends, if there's any sort of system to it. Because I think a lot of the time the body, and we have a lot of information, we just don't know that we have a lot of information. And so there's two benefits to that. One is we become aware of our own patterns. Like if I eat certain foods and those foods make me sick, after a while, like if you get sick, you're like, oh, okay, well, maybe I don't like, and then when you eat that food, maybe you do something that's, you have a counter remedy. So you sort of sit there and you prepare yourself, or you just know that you're not going to feel well. And you're kind of like, okay, well, this is a party and I want to have, whatever. I want to have that piece of bread and I really shouldn't have bread. Then you just know that that's what's going to happen. And maybe you don't do it every day, but when you do make those choices, you're aware of it. And I think it's the awareness. So I like to, so those patterns of things where we start to see that a lot of things make a lot of sense and it's not as mysterious in a way as people tend to like attribute it to, like, or it's age, or they don't feel well and they have no idea why they don't feel well. Because I think over time I had to make choices in my own life where I would be like, oh, okay, well, I can't eat this anymore, and I have a choice here. I can eat it and not feel well, and I can eat it. And most of the time I don't, and there might be the rare occasions, but it's just, how can I function or live the best life possible? And yeah, and I love helping people on that path because I think that's the path to empowerment. When you realize that a lot more things are in within, your power than not.
Speaking of path, when did you realize that this was your calling, your path? Was it a specific event or was it something progressive?
Um, I guess, well, two things happen. I think the one with yoga was really funny because I think I was working when I was working for the New York City Department of Health, and I had done my teacher training, and I was teaching classes, and I was working full time. So I was working, I was commuting into Manhattan and teaching class and working all day, and then coming home and teaching night classes, some night classes and weekend classes like
Wow.
Saturday and Sunday. And I was teaching a lot. And all of a sudden, one day, because I didn't do my teacher training to teach, I took it for myself because I wanted to learn more. I didn't do it because I wanted to be a yoga teacher. And all of a sudden, waking up one day and thinking to myself, oh, I guess I'm a yoga teacher. Like it was just like kind of happened. And the
Yeah,
fact that I think that it was all the classes I was being given. So all of a sudden I realized that I was really a good yoga teacher. And so then it was kind of like, wow, it wasn't something I had seen coming at all. Um, and then the other thing was when I started doing a lot of animal work, because when I was young, I wanted to be a veterinarian and I didn't
wow.
do that. And to realize that my world had I had come full circle because here I had done a lot of different things, and I then got to the point where I was working with animals anyway. And so it was just like sometimes those childhood dreams are really what we should like
Mhm.
somehow incorporate, or not even sometimes we should incorporate into our lives. And about a month or two ago, I had a chat with a new friend from South Africa, and our friend that we know, Mary Jane. And we were all talking about things we had done when we were kids that we do now. So Mary Jane was talking about the fact that she'd always had like a crayon in her hand or like something like she'd always been that artist. And now she's a graphic designer, but now has gone back to making that like a joy and a love and working with her
Mhm.
clients and her work. And my friend from South Africa who journaled from the time she was like 7 years old and now is a copywriter and uses writing and is now writing poetry and me with my animals. And so it was just so funny. It was like all of us had sort of gone in this very roundabout way because that's what we do as human beings. Nothing is linear. And had come to this place where we were actually all like doing what our heart's calling was in some way.
Beautiful. Awesome. How are you getting your clients?
How do I get my clients? Some social media and then word of mouth,
Mhm.
referral, personal referral is quite a lot. And so that's the majority. And then, depending on where I meet them. So I've gotten some clients through my yoga classes who have just like come to a group class and then I continue working with them or they ask me to work with them one-on-one on different things. So that's really the main ways.
Beautiful, beautiful. Love that. To finish, I'd like to ask you a series of rapid fire questions to on advices. Ready?
Okay.
What's the best piece of advice you've received so far?
Yeah, I guess the best piece of advice that I've received so far is I think that I've been doing a lot of work with emotions and emotional resilience and building resilience. And I think that the best information or the piece of advice I've gotten so far is to kind of look at
Mm.
what I'm feeling as a sign or a signal that something just is out of balance and not to ignore those signs. So just to look at them as information. And so that's probably been a really big thing for me in my life.
Makes sense. What has been the worst piece of advice you've received so far?
Oh, okay. So not the worst piece of advice, but probably something that, I think about, it obviously made an impression on me. So I went to my first meditation class, and I remember sitting there and going to my first meditation class, and the guy said, just don't think. And I remember thinking to I remember sitting there and thinking to myself, like, how do you not think? Like, it was just such a, yeah, it was like, it was just kind of funny. It was like, and thinking about that obviously afterwards for years, because I thought to myself, like, that's totally unachievable.
Yeah.
We have moments where we don't think, like maybe for a second or something, or maybe a millisecond, but in general, that's just what we do.
Mhm. Yeah. Imagine that you were blessed with a time machine and you can go back in time and sit with the 18-year-old Jan. What's the number one piece of advice you'd give to her knowing all that you know now?
Okay. I had some really hard times when I was around 18 and on. So I would say that recognize that you should follow your dreams and follow your heart because people have not necessarily ill-intentioned, but people have their own agenda for you, which is not usually your agenda or may not be your agenda.
Mm,
And so to listen to your heart and to listen to yourself because you're really wise. So that's what I would tell myself. Listen to yourself.
love that. I know you have a podcast. Imagine that today you're interviewing the most special person in the world, and that is yourself. What's
Okay.
the first question you want to ask yourself on your podcast? Again, don't think too much.
What's the
First question
first
that
thing I
comes to
want to
mind.
ask myself? I guess I would ask, what is your biggest challenge?
Hmm.
And what's your favorite thing?
And what are the answers to that?
Um, One of my favorite things is early mornings. I love, like, we're on here at 6 a.m., 7 a.m. here. I
Yeah,
love morning. I love to get up and I love the quiet. I love the sunrise. It's probably one of my favorite things. And my, my biggest challenge probably, I always say this is what makes me a great yoga instructor in some ways or meditation teacher, is I tend to be very highly anxious. And so, you have to work with what you're given. So that would probably, but I think that that's my biggest challenge. And to kind of learn that that's not, that's, I always labeled it as a bad thing and always was
mhm.
working so hard to change it. And now I just kind of breathe and I kind of laugh at it and say, okay, well, you're here because it's part of a sign that I'm here. So I'm just like, okay, you're here. And not to be so obsessed with trying to get rid of it, because I think that very scientific way, I was always looking, not that I don't try to manage it, but I was always looking for a way to eradicate it, to get rid of it. And now I just want to let it be.
Mhm. Love that. Love that. The last question I ask my guests, and that's my favorite question to ask, and that is, what's the smallest thing you've done that has had the biggest, deepest, most profound positive effect on both your life and your business? For example, for me, it's been starting my podcast. What about you?
Um, I would say for me, it's collaborations.
Mm,
I think to really look for people to collaborate with, like Mary Jane, who I've mentioned, we do beautiful collaborations of self-care workshops and other things. And then the current book project anyway. So look for valuable connections. And so when you asked about how other ways to grow my business, I do quite a bit of networking, which is not my favorite thing. I feel awkward in that, but I kind of force myself out of my comfort zone to do that. And I've made some beautiful, beautiful connections, friendships, and relationships. So I think that that's probably one of the most valuable things that I've done.
absolutely. I completely agree. Collaboration is where it's at. There's a saying that says there's competition at the bottom and collaboration at the top. you
Oh, I
know?
love that.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's what I'm all about. I'm all about collaboration because the pie is big enough for all of us. And also because
Mhm.
one part of my branding. In math, one plus one is two, but in real life, one plus one is not two, but 11. Two, three people coming together, it's not three, but 111, meaning our efforts exponentially explode. Sure, I can be successful on my own. You can be successful on your own, but together we can create empires, you know? So this
Absolutely.
is one of my favorite saying, part of my one plus one equals 11 branding that I love. So yeah, listen, yeah, and absolutely amazing. If someone wants to connect with you, what's the best way to do so?
Um, Social media is really good. Well, actually, the best way is probably LinkedIn and Facebook. Those are the two platforms I'm on the most. And
Mm-hmm.
then, yeah, that's really probably the best way. Send me a message
Mm-hmm.
via Messenger, direct message, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible.
So they just look up for your name, Jan Jeremias. Jeremias,
Yep,
sorry.
yep,
Okay.
it's okay. Yeah, Jan Jeremias. I'm
I must
on,
check then.
LinkedIn and Facebook, and yeah, and look for me there.
Awesome. Listen, absolutely loved our conversation. That's why I brought you for part two. Can't wait. I'm sure there may be a part three in the future to catch up. But for now, I salute you. You truly do without. Keep shining your light. Keep blessing the world. Your presence, your impact, your smile, your impact, everything you're doing, and most important, with your gifts. And always remember, you yourself, Jan, you're a gift. So stay safe, stay warm. I know it's still cold over there back in the Boston area. You're still coming off a long winter. So
Yes, yeah.
stay warm, stay safe. God bless, and talk to you very soon. Take care, my friend. Cheers.
Take care. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.